Hello again, Reg viewers. Now, it's the Reg Christmas party this evening, so we were thinking about something to get the party started, which is why we've got a Regcast for you today about archives. Yes, we are getting the party started with why you need an interactive archive today. We're going to explain that to you. We have a lot of practical detail for you as well, because we know that's the stuff that you like. So it's not just people telling you what you should do. We're hopefully going to explain to you exactly how it's difficult and what's the point of it as well. Now, just to make sure that you know about the little buttons above my head. So today we've got the obviously questions. That's the most important thing. If you want to ask a question about this, press the button and ask a question. It comes straight through to here. I ask it here and they answer it here. So you'll get to know what you need to know. Otherwise, you might wait for us to get to it, and we never will. We've only got an hour. Look, as well, the thing that I've forgotten that we've got and I haven't been reminding you about is our further reading links that you always see at the end. They're on a button as well, so you can get to those. Don't get to them yet. You don't need further reading until we've explained to you the stuff that we're going to explain to you. Give us your feedback afterwards and let us know if you like it. So, right, first of all, I'm going to get on to why we're here, first of all, because what we sat down and we've been thinking about is that archiving it's something that is put in the too hard basket for a lot of you, and let us know about that on the buttons. But it's something that very often you don't think about because there's other things to do first, and so it's not just something that you have to do. There's a benefit for it as well, and hopefully we're going to be explaining the benefit for us. And also, it's something that if it's done badly, it's almost worse than not doing it at all. So we're also going to explain the difference between those things and hopefully how you do it well. So who's going to be doing that? Because you don't want me to explain all of it. Now, on our Regcast with us today, first of all, at the far end of the table, there's Orlando from Mimecast. Hello, Orlando.
Good afternoon.
Now, Mimecast are experts in this kind of thing, aren't they?
We are, yes.
Well, go on, tell us.
Well, Mimecast is a cloud vendor of email management, predominantly. But we're talking about an interactive archive in the sense that we can include files. But the interactive archive itself is about being in the cloud. It's a new way of archiving. So we've seen a huge rise in the way email has been archived, and now we're looking at extending that into other file types and other ways of giving it back to the users. Now,
it's Reg's party tonight. When's your party?
Saturday.
It
is.
You don't get time off for having a party.
No,
it's good, because if you all got hangovers as well, then, there's no one's taking a sickie, I suppose.
Day to recover on Sunday, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Clever.
It's going to be a big do?
It is, yeah. It's on the river, so it should be good fun.
OK, well, just be careful.
Yeah, cold and wet.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I'm saying. And joining us also today, we have a real user, one of you guys, who's going to tell it like it is, from Taylor Wessing. Stuart. Hello, Stuart.
Hello.
Taylor Wessing, for people who don't know Taylor Wessing.
So Taylor Wessing is a global corporate full-servicing law firm. So we've got offices in the UK, Middle East, Far East and Europe.
So information for you is absolutely vital. I mean, you can't be losing information. You need access to all the information you have.
It's our core business. Documents, information, knowledge, and emails is our core business tools. That's what we use to communicate with our
question again. Christmas party?
Yes, this evening at Skylon next to the...
You law firm guys, you have some wild parties out there. If you're near Skylon, just be careful. Now, I also know that tomorrow morning, when you have your Christmas party hangover, you're doing something else, aren't you?
I am. I'm off to the Arctic to do a Arctic biathlon, which is a 50-kilometre cross-country dog sleigh ride and a 25-kilometre cross-country ski for Kids Company charity.
See, I do that all the time. It's impressive. And careful you don't run over any penguins. Anything like that.
Wrong continent.
I knew you'd get that. I knew you would get that. And our final guest for today, he's already put me straight, and he will do several more times in the next hour. From Freeform Dynamics, Dr. Stats himself, the Dark Low, Tony Locke. Hello, Tony.
Hello, Tim.
Now, you're all in different places in Freeform Dynamics, so do you have your sort of Christmas party via Skype or something like that?
Where being analysts, we don't get invited to Christmas parties, even internal.
You bring the place, you bring the whole atmosphere.
No one wants to take us along. So.
It's fine. We'll send you something in the post. You haven't been invited to ours, have you?
Absolutely not.
I shouldn't have done that live. Should have waited. I think comes out. There we go. Now, Tony, if you can possibly bring yourself to do it, can you explain to us what the problem is here and how the basic problem with archiving?
I'll give it a try in this season of festive cheer. We know from talking to the reg readers and getting feedback from them that today archiving is used basically just in a few niche cases. It's by no means deployed across businesses as a whole. It's usually been driven there by the need to meet particular compliance requirements. But that's posing a few challenges because, as I'm sure everybody out there knows, data volumes are going up all the time. The expectations of users in particular to be able to access everything all the time is pretty much now ingrained in their souls. When email first started, I was an IT guy, and we basically had very small mailboxes, and we insisted that everybody not use their email repository as their de facto filing system. You got an email, you read the message, you deleted it. You had an attachment in those novel days when attachments were still new. And would fit on the size of a 1.44.
Those were glorious times when attachments were still exciting.
Exactly. Yeah, and so we basically said, you get an attachment, you save it outside of email, keep it on your file system. Today, things have flipped over completely, and people now use their email system as their primary work tool. To get back to some of the things that Stuart just said, it's there because people use it. It's where they live almost in terms of work process. And so that's causing more challenges as people need to get access to information.
Exactly, is a challenge. I do that. It's not a problem.
You can always find everything you need just when you need it without too much effort.
Not really, no.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
That's the heart of the issue, and I'm exactly the same.
Yeah, and I think the challenge of trying to get people out of Outlook has been a challenge for years, for various corporates, us especially. We embed an awful lot into Outlook now, just because that's where they sit, especially lawyers. Email and the traffic that's coming in on email, it's client requests, it's client dealings, it's client negotiations, so it's all about the client, it's all coming in on email, so that's where they sit 90% of their time.
It's the one tool they'll have open all day, every single day, and then when they leave the office or they leave their laptop, they have a mobile device with email on that as well, so people never put it down.
And that fits very neatly onto the next slide that we have here, a poll of the readers of the register, and it's probably the only time anywhere in the history of the surveys that we've carried out with the audience where we've had anything approaching 100% response rate. Do you use email? Yes.
Well, who's not? Who's replying to a reg survey who's not using email?
Surely they got it in an email in the first place, didn't they?
It's a very interesting question. The more worrying part here are the ones that, unsure. I'm not quite... I don't understand how you can be unsure about whether you're using email or not. Even more than this, when we dug down a bit deeper, we found that email is not just used by everybody, but also it's still mostly provided by the companies themselves. People are not using external email sources, as part of their business life. Some are, but they're still very much the exception to the rule. It's still basically internally provided email because it's a core requirement. So it's a core expectation of users.
So there's been some theory about generation X, Y, Z, whatever the next generation is after Z. I'm not sure it goes double A then. That they are they're not using email and they haven't got email accounts. So the Facebook.
You hear that quite a lot of time, yeah.
But I don't know how. In my just own survey, my stepchildren, they don't have email. They're 14 years old, but I think by the time they get to the corporate world, they're indoctrinated into email, like you say. It's the only tool that everybody gives to everybody.
I was going to say, they're not working for a law firm, I'm assuming.
But to sign up for things like Facebook, you still need an email address. Sure. Email underpins everything. Even all of those tools that we're being told are displacing email, you still need email to authenticate yourself to them and to sign up for them.
And I think if we're looking at immediate problems that people are facing now, then it's these giant email files of stuff.
And it's also the fact that because email has expanded, mailbox sizes are still not infinite, so people start doing the local equivalent of archiving using the, quote, archiving tool that's within Outlook to basically save a local file somewhere, which, of course, immediately means that it's no longer accessible to anybody else in the company that might want to search through it if they've got those permissions. So, again, you're getting a lot of fragmentation going on even within the email system.
Because I was going, thinking, yes, that's what I do. What's the problem? What's the problem with that? Okay, so we have this, but within all of these different ways of communicating, they are all producing files, aren't they? They're all producing something that you might want to look at again.
They're always producing things, and users, as we know, are very bad at saying, yes, I'm never going to need this again. It's always, I want to keep it forever, even if the chances of me accessing the file again are limited. And there's been lots of studies that say anything between, after 2 weeks of creation, a file is maybe looked again once in its lifetime, possibly never. That's clearly different depending on the file and what you're doing, but there's a huge amount of information there that could be shuffled off somewhere else rather than kept on primary storage.
Good. Before we move on to the next thing, there's a couple of people just asking what we're going to, specifically what we're going to be covering today. I don't want you to give away everything here, Orlando. But Martin specifically is asking, what's the difference to, is the difference between an interactive archive and a non-interactive archive? Warning, if it's just a marketing-based difference, don't waste my time.
It's not marketing, so that's a very good question. If you think about the way email is archived now, it's vaulted, essentially. It's put in an archive and it's left, maybe for when someone wants to drag it back for rediscovery or they just happen to need the message at some point in its lifetime.
Yeah.
In most cases, the email just expires and it disappears, and there's no value in that way of working. You're just moving data from Exchange and putting it on an archive.
Yeah.
Now, an interactive archive, on the other hand, is one that drives value out of that data. So value for the business, value for the end users, and it makes the information much more usable. So it's not an old, crusty vault. It's something that's new and modern, and it utilises the cloud and the ubiquity of the cloud and the scalability of the cloud to be able to deliver interactivity to end users.
Okay, that's it. We want no more of that.
Yep.
I didn't want to sort of break into things, but I just wanted to keep Martin on board because I like your attitude, and we want some more. Like VK as well as asking pros and cons of. Are we going to be covering? Are we going to say yes or no? The pros and cons of private archiving versus public cloud.
Yes.
Yes, definitely. We're really going to be covering that quite a lot. And so, wait for that. We're not going to give the answers on that yet. We're teasing you on these.
And with a representative of the legal world here, we'll come up with legally binding definitions of what private and public clouds are.
No pressure.
I may need to
Okay,
maybe that's a bridge too far.
Okay, let's move you on, Tony. What's next?
Well, basically, the next slide feeds in very much to what we were just saying. Email has become so deeply integrated into most business processes. We asked the Reg audience, is email important to any of these business functions? And you can see that even down in manufacturing, that there's still, more than a quarter of people saying, yes, it is. It's ingrained in there. We did some research very recently where we asked people, how do your businesses communicate with other businesses? Are you doing lots of direct integration with their systems to get your sales processed or your supply chain in order or dealing with your customers? And email was still way up there as being a major mechanism used. It's embedded. It's become almost subconsciously embedded. And a lot of the time, the integration mechanism are the people using email. So they get something come in on email, they transfer it to another system manually, quite often, rather than automatically. And changing, even if you could get rid of email to one of these hypothetical, community sites, the processes that it's embedded in, you can't change these overnight. When they change, they're going to change slowly at the needs of the business, and at the moment they meet the needs of the business.
And to be clear, we're not talking about changing people's processes today, because they're not going to do it.
And I think some of the vendors have started to notice. I've seen introductions of new products recently where the vendors have started to notice that actually we're not getting rid of email. It is part of the business process. So let's integrate into the business process, actually into the email process. So they're actually writing solutions where you email the solution. So then it does something with your email because that's what people just naturally can do.
So it's going the other way around, not taking the email out of it, writing the other thing back to the email.
We are beginning to see people actually coming up with structured emails so that you can automate more of this integration that currently somebody does manually by retyping. So that's very much...
Are you in favour of that?
I think automation of anything where it makes sense is something definitely to be encouraged. Because the one thing that I know from my own experience is both, supporting end users as well as, my own activities, the more that I have to retype stuff around, the more likely I am to get it wrong.
Yeah.
And in some businesses, just getting a single digit wrong or even a comma wrong in a contract can be, potentially devastating.
But if you haven't got all this stuff sorted out and you're ending up doing something like that, then you're writing yourself
Email's not
potential.
going away, and the amount of information that's stored in it is just going to carry on growing and growing. I can't see any end for that in the next. I can't see an end to it.
No.
It may happen one day, but I've not seen it coming over the hill yet.
Yeah. Now, what's this structured, unstructured thing?
This is getting back to some of the things we were just talking about in terms of getting value out of the information that you keep. We've done a lot of research around, big data, but also around just generally analytics and how well people are able to explore and get value from the information repositories that they already have. And you can see from the chart that even the structured databases that they've had, in place for a long time, and that they've written lots of BI tools wrapped around them and reporting tools around them. 1 in 10, 1 in 50, 1 in 6 or so say that we're getting really good value from this already. 40% say, yeah, we're doing okay, but there's still loads more value that we can get out of it.
Most people are not, yeah.
And that's the areas where people have been very much focused on for the last 20 years. When we start looking at what's called unstructured data, but in reality it's not unstructured at all, it's just structured differently. To relational databases. It's non-relational database data. We can see that people know that there's lots more value that they could be getting from their information that they're just currently not accessing. And that comes down to problems with searching, it comes down to problems actually finding in the first place. And because we've got these multiple stores where things are kept, people don't know where it is, they can't find it easily. And if you can't find it easily, then how can you possibly do anything with it?
Now, let's make this real. Stuart, what sort of information are you not able to get out of your data if it's not, well, I mean, you've been solving a problem, but if the problem wasn't solved, what couldn't you get out that's in there?
So I think I think talking to your point, people talk about unstructured data. There is still structure within that data. So people talk email as an unstructured data source, but there is structure within an email. There's body, there's a to field, there's a from field, there's a date field, and if you stop to aggregate that information, you can actually get some intelligence out of it. And also there's textual structure to it. So keyword searches and also meta tagging data based on some more advanced search technology can actually put some structure around that data. We're being a law firm, we're quite analytical and we're quite structured in our approach, and we're very highly regulated. So our unstructured data isn't that high, really, so we structure quite a lot of things. We file all of our client matter, documents, emails, everything in a very structured way. So I think our slides will be slightly different to this. But are we getting all of the knowledge and information out of that? We're probably not. No, we're probably still not. Although we are structuring it quite well, we're still probably not getting all the knowledge and analytics out of that we could.
Yeah. Same question to you, Orlando. What's what is this data that's not being used?
I was just thinking there's a high degree of talking about business intelligence when it comes to email archive data, and I always talk about the data exhaust, being able to leverage what's in, let's say, a lump of big data for metrics to find out what your users do, how they communicate, who they communicate with. But also, if you think about it from a very basic e-discovery or compliance perspective, trying to find the needle in the haystack across unstructured data in an archive, as well as PSTs, as well as users' inboxes, as well as, heaven forbid, if they forwarded something to perhaps a Gmail account, is a challenge, is a huge challenge for users, in law firms in particular. And that's... goes hand in hand with sort of business intelligence, because it's more every day. E-discovery is more of an everyday tool because we're not quite there yet. We're thinking about using archive data for BI purposes specifically.
I mean, do we know the value in this?
It's going to vary company by company, but we do know that everybody has difficulties actually finding stuff in the first place. The number of times when I'm looking for a particular presentation that I think either I've created or one of my colleagues has created, the search capabilities that I automatically have available in the place where I do most searching, which tends to be in Outlook. I still do searches on the files as well. It's nowhere near as sophisticated as it could be. And I'll probably find the stuff, but it takes a lot of time. And clearly that time represents time when I could have been doing something better for the company.
And you probably find as well that you're recreating work. I've spent a lot of time writing things that have been written before. And everybody does that when they're in a creative capacity. So if there was a way to leverage some contextual analysis that analysed what you're creating and then suggested content from an archive to say, this has already been done, would this help? would be brilliant.
I suspect over time that content management and archiving will become much more intermixed than they currently are. Today they're almost two separate solution stacks, but essentially in many ways they're trying to meet very similar requirements.
So my point about this is that these things are sort of implicit. We all know that there's stuff that if we could find it, we could do a better job.
Yeah.
I get the impression, having done a few of and having done regcasts about business information more specifically, business intelligence more specifically, then I know that a lot of companies just aren't measuring this because it is implicit. So if you wanted to measure this, you've got an idea that some of the guys are thinking, we're not doing a very good job here, but that's a long way from saying, what's the cost of this in hours and money and opportunities and things like that.
Very often people look at the bottom line cost and say this system costs us X for the software, Y for the hardware, and that's it. They don't. The soft costs are sort of politely factored out because we think, well, the IT team are.
So how do you put those back
anyway.
But I've had previous experience of doing an e-discovery case. Being a law firm, we do get some of these requirements, and an e-discovery case on a particular word or a particular set of words for a particular case across an email system and a document management system. And when the courts start to ask for previous backups and previous historic data without a centralised archive for all of that information, those requests can come to millions of pounds, hundreds of thousands of pounds, depending on the size of your firm, the size of your data storage. But I have had experiences of it coming to a significant six-figure sums.
As one thing you can do, I guess, with that is because you're a law firm and time, money and time are linked intimately there. Then if you're spending this much, it costs you this much.
Absolutely.
But even outside of law firms, it's clear. I've worked in organisations and I've had colleagues that have had to do similar things in terms of discovering information, and that's involved sending out yet more emails to thousands of people, asking them to look through all of their files and all of their emails for particular things. And the amount of manual effort that took was enormous. So you've got the cost side of things where it's difficult to quantify the costs involved in not doing content management and archiving. But there's also the flip side, the value stuff. How often do you make decisions based on information that was maybe not complete? And that's something else that's come back from the reg audience time after time, that they know that they could make better decisions, which ultimately should lead to better value for the company, whether that's in terms of better revenue, lower costs, doing the right things so that they can move forward more quickly. They're all difficult to quantify, but there's certainly benefits in doing it.
Okay, I'll stop nagging you about this at the moment, but at the end, when we get to the point where where we're recommending to people what they should do, there's clearly got to be one of the first things: evaluate how much how much you are likely to get out of it. So I'll be wanting some good answers from you at that point.
And so,
first of all, your last one. Yes, it's nice to see a slide with a smiling face on it from you, Tony.
Well, I tried to find one with the grimace and tears and fangs, but I just couldn't do it.
That's all the rest of your slides.
And you've got to remember that this one is just showing the user expectations. So they always want to be smiling, whereas if you're an IT manager, you might have a different response.
Says
to
the
their
ex-IT manager,
but this is my take on what I think is going to happen in the future. So I believe, as I say, that the whole idea of archiving and content management will become intermixed, and instead of being just applied to particular silos where there's usually at the moment a compliance driver to do it, it's going to become much more pervasive, partly to help save money in terms of how we store data in the first place, because data volumes are still rising, and with the best deduplication and compression in the world, you're still going to want to save information on cheaper resource pools than your primary storage. Plus, as I say, this idea that users have that they can get hold of everything forever, at the drop of a hat, means that we're going to have to do archiving, and the two primary sources for that are clearly going to be email and the files that people have got.
You've put a little cloud there for archiving.
Whether that's an internal cloud, an external cloud, people are going to make their own decisions on that. Whether that cloud is actually a cloud, to get back to one of the conversation from earlier, just what makes up a cloud and what doesn't, it's going to be stored somewhere and accessible somewhere.
Does the availability of external clouds to do this change either the cost structure or the way in which people make decisions about this, or is this just a part of the cloud hype?
Of course it affects your decision making, it affects the way you buy the solution, because I think that one of the big problems and why we talk about interactive archive moving forward is historically you've bought a solution, you spec'd it out for 3, 5, 7 years, you probably filled it up in half that time, and then had to go back to the CFO for more cash to buy more hardware. And every 3 years, you're doing that again and again and again. The cloud offers you elastic scalability. It offers the ability to grow with your business. So I think moving forward, the cloud is, and lots of businesses have a cloud-first philosophy. They're thinking about cloud for upgrades and new solutions.
I'm not sure from the surveys we've had from Reg readers whether there's a big number that are putting cloud first as a philosophy. But what we do know are that for many organisations there are lots of solutions that are just too difficult for them to do internally or too expensive for them to do internally. And so therefore they go looking for external solutions, and quite whether it's a SaaS solution or a cloud or it's a hosted solution from somebody else. That gives them access to things that they couldn't otherwise do, either quickly enough or cheaply enough, or have the skills to keep running for long enough. So there's a whole bunch of different factors in there, but it's going to happen, I think. That the archiving and the content management will happen. Exactly where will vary company by company.
I think the key you're saying is asking about whether availability is a driver for cloud rather than on-premise or in-house. Availability is one. I think accessibility is a huge one, though. So availability could be one, but then people will argue that my systems are up 99.9 and it's as good as any day of the data centre. But accessibility is an issue, because then if you want to give access to that, you've got to get access to your network and your perimeter, and you've got to manage all of that. It's an additional cost, and it's an additional gateway, and it's an additional bit of software and team people and stuff that you have to manage. So I think accessibility is another big one.
Okay. And that's very much at the core of what we're talking about here, getting access to the information when you want to.
Which sort of leads us on to, Orlando, you need to explain interactivity to us. Yeah.
I do.
So let's give you your diagram for that.
So I haven't really gone into detail about what an interactive archive is, and I've deliberately held back because I said earlier that old archiving is a vault. It's a store of data. That data goes to die essentially, and it doesn't get used. It may get used for discovery cases every once in a while, but it offers no value to the business. And
it means you don't break the law.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, or you're dealing with a storage management problem. So in the late 90s, we rolled out archives to deal with limitations of storage on mail servers, and then compliance came along, or about the same time, and we created an archive to deal with those compliance requirements, and that's really where it's sat for the last 10, 15 years. What the cloud allows us to do is to bring accessibility and availability and scalability into the way we deal with big data in our businesses. So the interactive archive is a new type of cloud archive, and it's important to note that not all clouds are created equal. So going back to VK's question about public cloud and private cloud, there are some cloud archiving companies that will offer a cloud solution that perhaps isn't true cloud. It doesn't fall into that scalability model. There are some cloud archives that will also use public cloud infrastructures to store your corporate data, and that's down to you as a business to decide whether that's a good idea. But when we talk about interactive archive, the cloud allows us to give back more tools to the business, and allows us to give back more ways of archiving data, more services to archive into the cloud, and also more ways of consuming that data as well. So business intelligence is one, but the ubiquity of bring your own device and mobile platforms is another that very few archives support. If you think about your mobile phone, for example, if it's a particular product, most of them will only store or only give you 30 days worth of data on that device. So how do you get 31 days, 32 days? You're looking at interacting with an archive through the device to get historical data, and that's, again, driving value out of your archive. So, in essence, interactive archive, which I'll go into in a bit more detail later on, is about driving value, it's about driving business intelligence, it's about supporting platforms, it's about consolidating all of the sources of information that your users use and bring into your business into one single cloud repository. And that's important for a couple of reasons. We tried to do this before, actually. We tried once before to support email in the same kind of way. So our email server sat in the network. Over the years, we added solutions around it, which gave us a fragmented infrastructure. They gave us point solutions, essentially, to resolve individual business problems. And that fragmentation led to complexity, it led to cost, and it also led, interestingly enough, to users creating their own solutions. So if your business systems are too restrictive, our own research from Mimecast research shows us that those users will jump out to things like a webmail account, not maliciously, but because they just want to get their work
It means
done.
they can get stuff done.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So if you have a 2 meg limit on attachments, when was the last time you saw an attachment below 10 meg? You know, they need to get their jobs done, so they'll use their own services on their own devices to do that. And we're trying to solve those fragmentation problems now. We're trying to bring that fragmentation together. The cloud helps us do that as well, because the cloud can deliver those point solutions in a single unified solution, but for a much reduced cost. An interactive archive is a way of doing that with data in particular.
Stuart, is this the world that you guys used to live in?
Certainly the middle part of that slide was, yeah. I've previously implemented Mimecast as a cloud archive solution, and when I moved roles, I inherited a previously implementation of Mimecast, so I've been a customer twice in the not too distant past. But that middle layer where I was previously, definitely that's where we were. It was a very fragmented email infrastructure. It was point solutions trying to solve specific problems, and none of it really talking together. There was no joined up integration between those systems, and there's a lot of cost in there, and there's a lot of, so the tin and the boxes and the servers and the cables and the people looking after it, but then just the management overhead over the top of that as well. There's a huge amount of cost in the business.
Was it? Did people understand that was a problem, or did they just assume that's the way work is?
By people, I think, if you mean
people, yes. Users for a start.
But I don't think it's their problem. I think it's an IT problem to resolve. I don't think it's the business's problem. I don't think it's the user's problem. I think it's
straight down to the IT department.
Straight down to the IT department. It's the way we've configured it. It's the way we've had to configure it in the past, and it's our problem to resolve it going forward. So it's our business case to build, and it's our problem to resolve.
So to push this one forward as well. It's not a question of just responding to overwhelming external pressure.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's also being replicated now as people use more than one device to access these systems with. I don't know about you, but I've got a small, very thin laptop that I travel around with. I've got my main laptop back on my desk. I've got the smartphone. And I end up spending inordinate amounts of time before I go travelling trying to work out what files I need to synchronise around and which bits of email I need to synchronise around. And that, of course, again, is back to consuming more time. So we're extending from just being an email synchronisation problem to being a file synchronisation problem as well. And that's something that I think is going to get more and more pronounced as people start using tablets more and more. A variety of different tablets, potentially even some people having 3 or 4 tablets. And I can think of 1 or 2 analysts that fall into this category. So data synchronization becomes a problem all on its own, and once it's synchronized, then, or once you've started moving it around, how do you resynchronize it back? How do you keep that picture, even on your own platforms, to find stuff? I've been moving around thinking, I know that I changed this, but it's not changed here. It's still on the old machine. That's another manifestation of this same sort of problem.
How nasty do you have to be about it, guys? Because, for example, a lot of people just solve this by doing the easiest thing, signing up for a Dropbox or a Dropbox equivalent, and opening up some of the Dropbox folders so that their mates can see the stuff in it as well. Is this necessarily? Can you then bring them back into your world, or do you have to tell them, get rid of the Dropbox? You need to do something that's more in line with what we want.
So that's really key. What the users have been doing is building their own solutions to those problems that support their mobile devices, that allow them to work, and also that they can roll out faster than perhaps the IT team can. In many cases, when I talk to CIOs, they're complaining their users are using Box and Dropbox because their IT department take too long to roll out a SharePoint site, whereas they want to have that data in SharePoint. So one of the key concepts that underpins an interactive archive is about taking all of those individual services, whether it's Box, Dropbox, Exchange, SharePoint, Office 365, and integrating that data, consolidating that data into an archive to give it back to the business and the users. And you can see from the slide that we talk about it in 2 ways. We talk about acquisition and consolidation of data, so bringing in all of those sources, bringing together data into the interactive archive, which enhances the security of the data, and enhances the availability of the data. It allows us to do things like business intelligence, but also for the users, it gives us support for their devices. So they can access data from one source of the truth on their multiple devices. They don't have to do the synchronization backwards and forwards. And we can then build in access for other platforms and services as well. So the API interoperability is key too. It's a way to essentially keep a single repository that's available for e-discovery. It's available for end-user access. It's available for the business intelligence, and it's really there for everything. So it's acquiring, consolidating, and providing interactive access. Really.
So let's look at this in a sort of what are we going to do about it sort of way. So the first obvious problem that comes up over and over again is multiple PST files. They're all over the place, and we sort of we've half talked about that. We've half alluded to it. Is a pre-Mimecast or a pre-this project basic piece of preparation, basic piece of due diligence to say, let's get rid of the multiple PST files first of all.
Exactly.
You can't do it.
Yeah.
So that's really a management thing.
I think businesses are at a tipping point. They've got data everywhere, and the data needs to be accessible. It needs to be free.
Yeah.
But they don't know how to consolidate that. So one of the benefits of finding a cloud vendor that can help them ingest all of that historic data means that they can get that data into a single repository, and it can be the single source of truth. PSTs are a huge problem across networks because you do just create them very easily, very quickly. You save it to your desktop or your home drive. When you get an e-discovery request, it's a complete nightmare. So
you're going across all the different...
Exactly, yeah.
Even the ones, there might be ones that you just don't know exist.
Yeah, so the tipping point exists that we solve this problem now, and we bite the bullet and do it, or we don't, and it just gets worse. And then we upgrade the existing solution again in 3 years' time, and another 3 years' time, and another 3 years' time.
But I don't think it's a prerequisite to your question. I don't think sorting out your PST problem is a prerequisite to implementing a archive, because you've got a problem now, and that problem's just getting worse. And you need to address that problem now. So the PSTs is part of the problem. That's an historic part of the problem. There's also an actual problem happening today, which is you're still receiving emails, and they're all still getting older, and they all still need archiving. So solve the problem that you've got today by implementing something, and then look at your PST problem as a secondary activity.
So tell me, how do you do this then? How did you do this? If you go through this into some detail with me. So you started off, you see that you've got a problem.
Yep.
There. First step.
So we saw we had multiple problems over a long period of time. They just kept coming up. So
you can talk about this now that you've fixed them.
At the time, I was thinking, there's no problems.
Yeah.
Just opportunities.
You've been to too many vendor presentations.
So there was a number of issues. The e-discovery issue, the internal archiving solution that we had a contract coming to an end with an email hygiene vendor. We've also got various different other contracts and other point solutions for virus protection and encryption and various other encrypted sort of gateways of sending emails around. So there was a number of problems. The catalyst really was the ending of a contract, really. I'm truthful, it's the end of a particular contract on a particular email hygiene product. You start looking at the marketplace and say, what is it? What can we have? And then you come across the likes of Mimecast that have everything, so they solve multiple problems. So we thought we had one problem, which is email hygiene problem, which we need a new email hygiene solution for. This was quite a long time ago. Mimecast came up as an email hygiene solution, as well as an email archive solution, as well as a disaster recovery solution, as well as a signature solution and an encryption solution. So it then just expands out, and your business case really does just begin to build.
This comes to a question from sort of Gordon here, saying, is there necessarily no distinction between your email archive and your file document archive? Do they basically become the same problem?
I think they do become the same problem, because your file store archive is just continually growing as well.
Yeah.
What we are, and I said before, we have quite an advantage. We have a fully document management system, so we don't store files just randomly on file shares. It's fully, but that still is a problem. That is still growing and becoming an issue, and we will be looking at pushing that archive off to somewhere potentially in the Mimecast futures?
That's a good question, actually, because there's a great degree of contextual information that exists between email and files. Because when was the last time you created a file and didn't email it to somebody? All of your files and Stuart's files all exist in an email environment, and most of your intellectual property sits in your email environment. So separating the two, you lose that intelligence, you lose that contextual metadata that exists between conversations.
But your customers, your potential customers, do they come to you and are they thinking about, well, I've got to do something about my email archive, can you help me out with that? Do you then have to then pull them through and say, you've got to think about your files as well, mate?
Yeah. Yeah,
because most basically what you do.
Yeah, most.
And what do they say to you?
Most of them, most of them are. They're thinking about ways to solve that problem because they're rolling out SharePoint and they have users who are using Box and Dropbox and they have a vast array of PSTs and they have all of these problems that we have to solve across the network.
But to get back to the point that David made there, it really is about identifying where do we start. You don't try and boil the ocean. That doesn't happen in IT. People's budgets don't work that way. So you've got to find something that you can start with, see the benefits from that, use that to help initiate the next business case. Is that the way it worked?
Yeah, it did. But like I said, the business cases really did start to just keep coming because of the solution. I think this is true of many SaaS vendors, is that they constantly build on their solutions. They're constantly adding value to it. They've obviously constantly got, no disrespect to any vendors, they've obviously constantly got a revenue stream with a SaaS provider because you're constantly playing on a subscription model. So they've constantly got a revenue stream, but because they've constantly got a revenue stream, they can constantly develop and enhance and add more value. And then you don't have to implement that value. You don't have to think, oh, right, I've just got the next CD or the next floppy disk, as you suggested, and I've got to put that in the machine, I've got to get somebody to do it, and I've got to read through the notes of what, is it actually worth the effort of upgrading? You just get it overnight. And all of this additional value comes. So those business cases at that time just literally just fell off the tree.
And it's now, there's also a question coming in here. We're not actually talking about deleting anything. We're just making this assumption that all data is valuable.
True.
So we have to store it. And I think that's terrific for storage vendors.
I can give an answer to that one.
Yeah.
We've asked this question of the register readers.
Yeah.
And they've told us, do we have some form of document keeping, file keeping process and procedure inside the company that says, here's our policy?
Yeah.
And the answer usually is, no, we haven't got a policy. Or where we do have a policy outside of the more sophisticated organisations that have got some kind of requirement placed on them from outside. The answer is our policy is we'll be safe, we'll keep everything.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what we can delete and we don't know what we can't delete. We probably recognise that there is stuff that we should delete, but we think that the challenges of not deleting it are smaller than the challenges of working out what to delete.
Working out what there is to delete and then deleting it.
The register audience have told us that on more than one occasion.
And that's very true. With existing archives and the way classic email storage archive environments work is that it is hard to remove data. And
you're afraid to remove data.
Yeah, exactly. And an interactive archive has to give the administrator granular retention control. So you have to be able to say to the business, the policy you've given me as an IT guy, I want to be able to retain email for X number of years based on these users or this particular group. If it contains a certain file or file type or content, I need to be able to change the retention up and down. And you also need to give some of your users the ability to make that decision as well. So
we're still waiting for the holy grail of a tool that can come along and automatically, accurately categorise everything we've got, assign that to predefined policies, and then work out how to keep it and what to keep it.
And also know that in future it's not going to change its value and suddenly become valuable.
Absolutely.
But if you're archiving in the cloud, remember you're not paying for storage, if you have the right vendor, of course. A lot of people ask me about being able to delete the inconsequential email about cake in the kitchen, for example. And I always say, you're asking that because you're worried about paying for the storage, aren't you? And they always say yes. Whereas if you push your archive out to the cloud, and in fact any cloud vendor will reduce that worry because you're not paying for storage, you're just paying for retention.
Okay.
But that inconsequential email, sorry to interrupt, about cake in the kitchen, it may be inconsequential today, but if you've got a food poisoning case tomorrow, then a lawyer might come along and ask, well, what did you say about the policy?
If one person wasn't offered the cake, it's constructive dismissal. So
keep everything.
So Stuart, you keep everything.
I say that the flip side is we do, and it's exactly that point. It's the things that we can classify. There are things we can classify. We have a retention period on. The stuff that we can't classify, we keep, because we don't know. But the other side of that coin, which I have experienced, is when you get a request from court to delete specific things, and those things do come in, you have to find it and delete it. And the advantage is, if it's in one place, in one archive, the files and the emails, you have one place to search and one action to perform the deletion process. And can be done, and it's fully audited and documented and secure, and you've got due process around it and due record around it of what's been deleted and why. So that's the flip side of it. It does sometimes happen, and when it happens, if you haven't classified it and you can't, it's a very difficult thing to achieve.
That doesn't help with deleting it from your backup files, but...
Yes.
That's a completely different Regcast, Tony, which will get you back for. Now, we also hear, on the practical basis, we also hear regularly now that the bring your own device debate is basically over. People bring. They are going to bring, and they are going to use, even if you tell them not to. How do we get them inside the tent?
Can I, before you answer that, can I just give one example?
Yes.
Bring your own device doesn't mean that you need to live with absolutely everything, every device that's out there. I was with a guy last night who's the CIO of a mid-sized company, so £150 million company. So mid-sized by some, small by other definitions, big by other definitions. But he has basically got a whole bunch of, thousands of people that sell their services to end customers. And he can't tell them, I provide you with a device. So they do bring their own devices. But the only way he could basically support that was to say, but it's got to be one of this device or this device. You can't support everything. So
I think
it's impossible.
I think to your point, the bring your own device is now brought their own device. It's here, it's happened, and I can't understand why anybody's still debating it. And also, I had a major frustration when it all happened that this is the first time for years. IT people have been complaining that they don't use our technology and there's no user adoption and nobody wants IT and we're all stuck in the basement. And then you get somebody come tapping on your door going, can I use one of these? And the first thing that we say is, oh, no, don't do that. What do you mean you want to use IT? Put it down. You're just not sophisticated enough to use IT.
I remember going back to the beginning of email and how important it is. And we just introduced email, and I had to go to the best salesman in the company that I was head of IT for at the time and persuade him to use the laptop and to use email on the laptop. And he wasn't keen. However, within a week, he turned into the most fanatical user. And he was really great because I started taking him along to the presentations I had from vendors to get price cuts because, someone who sold stuff for as much as he could. He was really good at getting people to drop their prices because he knew how to negotiate with them. But, IT's changed a lot.
Yes. But so how do we make sure that in that environment that we are capturing everything that's being created? How do you do that?
Exactly. So you have to have the tools in place, essentially. So you have to make sure the users don't have a reason to use their own services. They can use their own device, but you have to deploy apps to those devices which allow them to access their archive, which allow them to send and receive emails perhaps securely and certainly through the corporate environment. But the policy control around all of that has to be centralised. So it's no use having, going back to the fragmented infrastructure, having a variety of solutions that may or may not work if they're out of the office or if they're on a 3G connection or they have to dial into a VPN. It has to be seamless to the end user and it has to be controlled by the business in a centralised fashion. Once all of that's in place, there's no reason for the end user to have to worry about using their webmail account if they can't send a large file because they know the business is giving them the tools they want. And we've got to the stage now, I think, where businesses have recognised that they have to keep up with that because we used to say, as CIOs, well, you can't use that technology. As Stuart said, the culture of no was the culture, and that was it. And users went off and did their own thing because now they can, because BYOD is so ubiquitous. But we're bringing them back in, I think, slowly we're bringing them back into the business.
The really good point here is that with email, at least, we understand how to deploy email to a wide variety of these new bring-your-own-devices. The CIO I was talking to last night had to restrict things down to just a couple of devices because essentially he had a really complex mobile app that he couldn't port to every device. It's just impossible. Economically, it was beyond their means. So email, we know how to do that. So we've got a much better handle on how to allow people to do use more devices. So that's something we can address.
Luckily, the devices all support email natively in most cases.
Yep.
So long as you're providing centralised policy control and policy management for as the business, then those devices can interact through your corporate network and be compliant and be archived and be encrypted if required.
Are you ever in the position where you're coming to, your potential customers are looking at this and you're having to say to them, you need to do a little bit more before we get into this to make sure that we're not getting that problem where people are just escaping from the corporate environment all the time?
Sometimes. I think most CIOs, IT departments recognise that that's happening, and they know that the cloud has crept into their business and that users are using their own services and platforms, and they're trying to solve that problem. The consumerisation of IT is just phenomenal, the pace it's brought new devices into and platforms into the business. So I think people generally know. If they don't know, then they sort of go and have a look under the carpet and find out fairly quickly.
They need to be told.
Yeah. And I think that is here, and it's again, and I think it's a debate that needs to end because it's here. Bring your own services here. They have brought their own service, and they're going to bring them more services. We've just got to make sure we've got policy and management process in place to educate them and help them understand what the risks are of using them.
And that's a really important point. Education about, when we do say no, we're saying no for a reason. It's not, we're just saying no because we can't do it. There's a reason behind why we're saying no.
This is the rules under which the business works. This is the law. This is
and
your
it's
contract,
not IT,
whatever.
and it's not IT saying no because IT is saying no. IT's saying no on behalf of the business because the business is saying there's a reason for not doing this.
But also communicate. So I did a communication around Skype. So I was getting lots of requests for using Skype. People were using it on their personal devices. So my communication was, if you're happy having a conversation in a coffee shop that can be overheard by anybody around you, then fair enough. But if you want a secure communication, then I can deliver you a secure communication. Similar with Dropbox. If you're happy putting a secure client file on a public transport on a bus and sending it to the side of London, and anybody on the way could have a quick link inside it, then fair enough, use Dropbox. But it just needs to be communicated in a way that they really understand, and they get the risk and they get the problem.
I could not agree more. I mean, we've talked about this on many occasions, that the education and communication side is really important. And a classic example, I was sitting on a train a year or two ago, and there was a person behind me having a conversation on their mobile phone, on Clear, about redundancies that were coming in their company and who was going to be made redundant. And his assumption is that nobody around me know them. I know the company. I knew one of the people who was talking about. He shouldn't be having that conversation there. But that's down to training.
Did you phone through the tip to us?
No, I didn't.
This is how we get on news, Tony. We need
no,
to.
I know, but that's the point. You've got to tell people whys, but not just the whats.
But I see what you mean. It's just it's a final question there, Stuart. So, Angela's got a question in. So, she's saying in her business she's got 50,000 plus employees. People can bring any device they like, but they don't allow access to their services from those devices. But you sound like you're a little bit more relaxed about this.
Yeah,
and you're comfortable with that.
And we've done policy and education platform. People sign up to the policy, so they agree with the fair usage of those devices. And if they don't sign up to the policy is pretty robust. It puts a lot of power in my hands on their personal devices. And I've had people say, I'm not agreeing that you can wipe my device and remove all of my photos of my children. And the answer is, OK. Then you don't get your device connected to my corporate network. So the whole bring your own device is a complete culture and power shift, and it's a request coming from them. So you can almost set the agenda and you can set the policy.
Right. Now, when you're implementing this kind of archive, I want to know how much are the users going to see? How much are the users going to see as a difference? Do you just tell them it's in an archive now, or do you really? You have to go out and train them and tell them what
you do. Yeah. You do. So the big benefit is for the users. You're giving users tools that empower them and make them more productive. So you have to teach them how to use those tools, and in a lot of senses, those tools should be fairly easy to use anyway. There shouldn't be a huge training overhead. But it's about making use of the actual data. It's about saying, well, all of the previous archives are now wrapped up into one. All of the sources of information that you use at a desktop level and across the internet are wrapped up into the same platform. So you've got a unified search. You've got a federated search across that entire record set. You can access that from your desktop, from your tablet, from your smartphone. And you just need to make sure they're aware of that, because that then starts to trickle down through the business, and it means that you don't have to keep going back to them, and they don't have to keep raising help desk calls if they're looking for something. And I think the mobile device is a good one because, as I said earlier, 30 days worth of email data on a smartphone is not much. And a lot of people do like to refer back. And just going back to your point, the earlier question about supporting BYOD, the benefit of interactive archive is it can give you those tools that help you support BYOD, because it gives your users the tools they need to access the data without you having to say no and cut out all the external services.
But you do have to train people.
Yeah, you do.
The idea that there are applications that users can just pick up and use straight away is a myth,
Yes.
frankly. Could they do it? Yes. Are they going to be able to do it as effectively as you would like them to be? No, is almost certainly the case.
But also, to your point, to Adam's point, that's an opportunity to sell it. It's an opportunity to sell the value. So it isn't just a case of, actually, we need to train you because it's a different interface, and it's not. It's Outlook. It's exactly, look and feels exactly the same. So it's not a huge business change. It's not a huge training program. But also, you can have it on your smartphone, you can have it on your tablet, you can have it on the web. So it's an opportunity to sell the benefits as well as get them through a training course and just make sure that they're...
And if you're sensible, it gives you the opportunity to say, we train you on the policy at the same time, and the why you shouldn't do some things in public places, and why you shouldn't have conversation. It's an opportunity to go just beyond the use of the tool into the, here's what we're doing. Here's how you can exploit it. You've just got that opportunity to take that training to another level, but we know how difficult it is to get training budgets.
And ultimately, you're doing this to empower your users. So you want the users to leverage those platforms to get their job done quicker and feel empowered and feel more productive. The days, I think, of buying a sort of black box solution that sits on the network and does things are over, because that doesn't offer value for the end users. It doesn't give them any new tools to help them get their job done.
You've got the chance to get the users to want to have the training as well, because we know that as well as the training budget side, there's also a reluctance. Do I want to go for the training course? You can sell it. You've got to be proactive and really sell this.
Now, how much of an audit trail do we have to make sure is built into this? I'm assuming that you're very careful about this sort of thing, where things have come from, when they went into
Absolutely.
the archive, who's been looking for them,
and that's key. Chain of custody is key, the metadata is key. One of the problems, I think, as probably everybody's finding when they do e-discovery tasks, is that proving the provenance of a message in the chain of custody is quite hard to do. So again, a central source of the truth, the central repository, means that your e-discovery is simplified. Chain of custody is there. When you ingest data, that you can prove that chain of custody as well. You're not having to then correlate logs from 5 different systems into one case.
Not equally important to everybody, but fundamentally important to you, Stuart. The idea that you know
absolutely,
when a file was created.
Absolutely, when it's created, who's looked at it, who's moved it, everything. All of our internal systems are fully audited and fully tracked.
Not everyone's going to care about this, though, Tony.
Lots of people do, and just because you've got a repository where potentially everybody could see everything doesn't mean that everybody should be allowed to see everything. So getting those policies in place on who can see the right things is really important up front. To everybody. Everyone wants that control. You've got to have that control.
Give us some detail on that, Orlando. How are you ensure that?
Granularity is the key. So you have to have granularity of policy control. You have to have a granularity of access control. You can't be bringing, as Tony said, everything together and then just allowing people to run searches across it whenever they feel like looking for something. It's got to be fully audited. It's got to be visible to the business what the IT team are up to. And I think really, for the first time, the IT department realised this is happening, because if you're running an email environment, then on premise you can drill into some fairly secret stuff and not be detected. Whereas when you've got an interactive archive in the cloud that provides the metadata, the chain of custody, and the auditing and logging, it's very visible about what you're up to, and you can't run searches and be unseen.
Well, it's also a case of, as was said by Orlando right up front, that not all clouds are equal. So you've got to know where the cloud is. Lots of companies want to know exactly where my data is going to be residing.
Exactly the question here. That's going to be a sort of it's going to be a block for a lot of people to say, if I don't know where my email archive sits, my file archive, my archive, whatever it is sitting, I can't I can't have one.
And we always tell organisations to do their due diligence. You have to talk to us and any vendor about security, about data jurisdiction, about encryption. You have to ask those questions, because anybody can set themselves up with an Amazon Web Services account, call themselves a cloud vendor, and store your data in a variety of different countries. So you have to follow the due diligence. And a reputable vendor is one that will tell you exactly what you want to know. If they're not, then walk away.
Do you put your stuff on a third-party cloud?
We do, yes, but we ensure we know exactly where it is. We ensure it is fully audited, both security policy, and we know which jurisdiction that data's in, because it's essential, absolutely essential.
And you find that your cloud vendors are capable for that?
If they're not capable, we won't.
Then you're not considering them?
No.
Yeah, I suppose, a stupid question, really, isn't it? No, not my first, probably not my last. And, OK, guys, now, in the couple of minutes we've got left, what we need to do is we need to be able to get people started on the business case for this. And so, first thing. My
mum said there's no such thing as a stupid question, because you've got to ask any question you want to ask.
I'm testing the limits of what your mum said. Orlando, OK, so we've got started. What have they got to do now, this afternoon?
So, as Stuart said, often the tipping point for a lot of businesses is renewal of a contract. Something's up for renewal, whether it's a security gateway or an existing archive. New versions of Exchange are coming out fairly shortly. There's lots of reasons to look at refreshing the way your business works from an email retention perspective and a security perspective. And maybe now is the time to think about looking at a new solution that offers more value and offers you more tools and functionality.
OK. Stuart?
Yeah, I agree, but I would really look at what the total cost of ownership is of your existing, especially if you're on-premise. Total cost of ownership with your on-premise solutions will be dramatic.
And what's in that? What's the lines in that people might not get?
So, well, it's stuff. I think it's stuff that people know. The backup charges, the storage charges, the people time management charges, not just of the people who are doing it, but those people who are having to be managed to do it as well. So how much management time and how much HR time. It does get very granular, but once you start stacking all of that up, it is a substantial business case to get rid of.
About how much do you save then with this?
Oh, that's a $1 million question.
Yeah, it is $1 million. There we go. No, yeah.
I think the previous firm I worked for were quoted a six-figure sum in savings per annum. Due to just staffing costs, like I said, all of the above. And ongoing, that cost, you're not reoccurring. Again, at a previous firm, I got into a position with a vendor where I had to upgrade the client and the back end and the client and the back end to get from one version to the next, like 3 versions up. That task alone is a business case to roll out a new solution.
It is possible to do. Tony, I'll give you the last word.
I would say that, Stuart says that people should know these answers, but frankly, they might know the answers, but the answers are probably in lots of different places. So the first thing you've got to do is something I've said time after time, know what you're doing, know what you've got, know where it is, and that's something you've got to put all of that together in one place, because you've probably got those answers, but you don't have them to hand. You've got to get them to hand so that you can start making decisions based on fact rather than intuition.
Okay, and the amount of time this problem's been sitting festering, I would say good luck to you on that. But guys, thank you very much for that. That's very interesting. Thank you very much, Reg viewers, for watching today. If you've got a party coming up, have a good time. Don't drink too much. And these guys won't. Especially you, actually, Stuart, seeing as you've got to go to the Arctic. Let us know what you thought of that. Go for the links and have a look at the detail that we've got. It's got some white papers in there. We'll give you some more background to what we've been talking about. And we'll see you soon on the next Regcast. I've been Tim Phillips, and so from me, goodbye.